Hello, everyone, and welcome to Replit 101, where I'm back in the UK and back with my wonderful lighting setup, so you don't have to watch me from up my nose as you did last fortnight. I've got to stop saying fortnight. Apparently, fortnight is not a very international word. 2 weeks ago, we'll say that. Well, welcome to Replit 101 Coding Helpline. This is where we try to help out all of our users who are having trouble with their programming. And it's either going to be a head scratcher for me, I'll try my very best to help you, or luckily we've got some people in the community in the chat who are hopefully going to help us out. Mainly, it's you, buddy. We're going to make sure that we try and solve some problems like we did last week. Let's hope Nathan doesn't turn up with a head scratcher of CSS again, because he properly bamboozled me last time. But before we get started today, I just want to throw the spotlight on a few events that are happening over the next week or so, because we are having our very, very first tutorial jam, which I'm very excited about. If you've taken 100 days of code for yourself, then you will know what the tutorial system is. It is that little pane on the left-hand side of the screen and the floating video. Now, these two things feel a bit like best in class. It's very, very difficult to find learning material and learning guides and things like that that exist within a coding platform, let alone a brilliant coding platform like Replit. And we're really proud of it. Now, of course, you probably know me and my bald head from 100 Days of Code, but we worked on the tutorial pane and the floating video features, and it's available for everyone. If you want to find your way to our Tutorial Jam website, there's some documentation on how you can build it yourself, and you just build it in any REPL. And we are having a competition over the next 2 weeks where we want people to build just one tutorial REPL that teaches something really amazing. So if you think you can teach something really cool in just one REPL with a couple of pages of tutorial and maybe a video floating over the top, then do, because we want to see the best and the brightest cool things that you want to teach us, and there are prizes up for grabs. First place is going to be $750, second $500, third $250, and there will be some special mentions which get Replit swag. That's my personal favorite prize, because you get to flaunt the fact that you've won something when you wear your amazing t-shirts or whatever you bought around. There are some rules, of course, and there's a lovely video of me, as you can see here, talking through how to make those tutorials. But if you've got any interest in teaching anything programming or computer science related, please do get into that. Live stream is on Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, where we'll be kicking off and talking to a few people and setting the scene. Then you've got till the following Saturday to submit something, and we'll be judging and giving you the results then the Saturday after that, which will be October the 29th. No, November the 5th is the deadline, and the result will be November the 12th. But that's me finished talking about that, and we're going to jump straight into answering some questions today, because we've got two people in the chat that were very keen to look at day 41. So what I've done is I've brought up my solution for day 41, which I was told I didn't do one of the things I suggested I did in the challenge itself. I do that sometimes. I put a challenge up there and go, well, maybe you can do this. Maybe you can add a bit of extra to it. And in my case, it was passing it all in one line. Now, we've got two questions today. We've got one from James and one from Ramona. Now, Ramona, I've already got yours up and ready to go. So we'll have a look at yours first, I think, if I can track it down. Here we go. So Ramona very nicely posted this question in the Discord and in ask.replit.com. Either of those places are where I go to look for questions before we do this each and every week. But he's spotting things in my user interface that maybe I shouldn't be showing, but I'm saying nothing. I'm saying nothing. But ask.replit.com here is the place to go if you want to ask questions, not just about 100 Days of Code or coding questions in particular, but pretty much anything to do with Replit. If you can't get something to work and you think it should, that's the place to go, where community members are helping and answering questions, and our brilliant customer service people are in the chats as well talking. But this is what Ramona asked. Any chance get some guidance on how to use only one input to get the name, URL, description, rating, and use splits? Well, Ian, who's cracking teacher from Scotland, has posted a example of where to start, Ramona, but I think we need to have a proper look at how this might work. This is the working solution. So I'm just going to run it for a second to show what's going on. I think Buddy is pointing out the fact that there doesn't seem to be anything on the left-hand side of my screen. I'm saying nothing. So we'll give a name. I'm just going to put some useless data in here at the moment. So a URL of some kind, a description, and a rating. Did I int that? Is it going to crash? It didn't, so I'll just do that. And so that gets saved then in the dictionary independently. And we had two questions here today. The first from Ramona is how we take that all in one go and we split it. And the second one is from James, who's asking if he can use some kind of loop to add to it. Now, the answer to both those questions is yes, but that's not what Coding Helpline is all about. Coding Helpline is about how we get into that and see if we can get that working. So let's take Ramona's question first of all. And Ramona, please feel free to pop in the chat if we're doing what we want to. If I'm talking a lot of rubbish and it doesn't make any sense, then let's have a look at that. But let's start with seeing what split does. And to do that, I'm just going to go into a blank REPL, make a Python one. I'll leave it public in case you guys want to have a look at it later on. And hopefully it'll connect in a second. There we go. And we'll just take some input and we'll have a look at what split does. So I'm going to call my input my details. I'm just going to take it in. I'm not going to do anything fancy here. I'm just going to put a little prompt symbol and let the user type. I'm going to print out what they typed in. Then I'm going to split it. Now, I don't remember if split works on the thing itself, so I'm going to do this just in case. My details equals my details dot split. One good thing to do is if there's something new that you haven't seen before, or a new bit of code that you're thinking, oh, that bald dude has told us to use it, but I don't really know what it's doing. Let's have a look and see how it's happening. What I would always do is just print it out and see what it looks like. So I'm going to print my details now underneath. Me details. Sorry, I turn my all the code intelligence and suggestions off before I'm recording, so it doesn't confuse anybody. And then it means my spelling is atrocious. So I'll run this and we'll have a look. So it's going to prompt me for something, and I'm just going to give it. Let's give it, say, three things. Let's give it a website name, Replit, www.replit.com, and a description. That's another thing. I'm going to call it best. Okay, so the first line it's printed out is what we typed in, which was a bunch of text. But have a look what it's done to that second line there. What does that look like to us? That looks very, very familiar to me. I'll give it a few seconds in the chat. If that third line on the screen there looks familiar to you, what is it? Pop it in the chat. It's something we've done prior to day 40 something, but it's a nice little thing that we can do. Buddy's put a question while we're thinking of that. Well done, Ramona. Straight in there. Makes a list. So what split does is by default, it splits it on spaces and new line characters. Now that does mean there is a limitation here. That description is going to be something that's a little bit more difficult for us to work with. And yet you're right as well, Buddy. Converts this string into an array. Buddy's got the same thing as me. Apologies, by the way, if in my videos I'm constantly saying array when I mean list. Python is a language that has decided that it doesn't want to use the same thing as all the other programming languages. All other programming languages use arrays, which are less good. They are worse than lists, don't get me wrong. But from every other programming language using a different word, you do get stuck in a rut sometimes. So I do apologize if I say arrays and I mean lists sometimes. I do try and catch it, but you know, I didn't get this bald head from being a young man. The age means I've repeated it lots and lots of times. But you are right, so it's a list. So that means what I can do is I can actually pull out the individual parts. So I could say name equals my details 0, which is going to be the first element, the 0th index in the list. I could say website equals my details. I can't spell at all here. Look at that. My details. There we go. My details 1, which would be the second element, and so on. So the nice thing about this is that I can split those things, The problem with it, I think I said this to you in Discord earlier on, Ramona. The problem with this is what you're doing is you're making a very, very fragile type of code because, as we know, if I say to the Python interpreter, if I say, I want you to go to the first index, I want you to pull some data out, and there's nothing there, it's going to crash the entire program. It also gets a bit dicey when we're talking about our description here because descriptions are going to have spaces in them, which is going to confuse it. So we might want to work our way around that a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this chunk a minute. And that's a little trick, which I don't know if I've shown you guys yet. I know I've put in some of my answer videos where if you Python is a bit of a weird programming language and it doesn't have multi-line comments. Comments, you remember, are single lines that start with a hash symbol and they're ignored by the code interpreter. So it's just a way of you putting comments to yourself, which is handy if you're explaining code. Most programming languages have a way of going, start the comment here and stop it there. So you can just write a big paragraph if you want to. Python doesn't. The only way to do it in Python is to turn code into basically a string by using the 3 quotes trick and just saying, you're some text now. That'll be ignored, thankfully, so we can go on from there. But let's take that in as a single line and see what we can do. So I want to go for details this time. It's going to be a bit easier. And the message in here is going to be a bit easier. Now, I'm not sure. I have done F strings at this point because I can see an F string at the bottom. Let's put an F string. Why do I want an F string? F string there. But I am going to say enter name, URL, description, and rating. Now, we are going to get a problem in a moment that we need to think a little bit about, and I'm going to show you that in a sec. We can say our details list becomes details. Really can't spell tonight. .split. Then we can set these values quite easily then. So website name is going to be equal to details 0. The first thing that comes out. Website URL going to be equal to details 1. Website description is going to be equal to details 2. Website rating is going to be equal to details 3. So it's pulling out all that stuff for us and it should print it back out. So we'll see if this works now. Okay, so let's go Replit. Replit.com. What was the next one? Description. This is an amazing website and my rating 5 stars. People watching live, any guess what's going to be the problem when I press enter here? Remember what split does is it breaks up text into individual chunks based on white spaces. So that's spaces, that's enters, that's all characters like that. While you have a think about that, I'm just going to pick up a question from earlier and answer it. But if you can predict what you think is going to happen and why this is going to be a problem, then we'll have a look at that in a second. And so I do want to go back to this question before I pick up the answers. So do click and press type. But you asked if there's going to be a Node.js 100 days. I think the reality is I don't think I can do 100 days in every single language on the platform, although I'd love to. Node.js is a great one for us to work on. We'll certainly do some work in it. But I'm not sure if we'll do 100 days straight away after the 100 days of Python is on there. But if you are interested, the last sort of 20 days are going to be Flask and web scraping and things like that. So it's similar sort of technologies based on Python. Right, Ramona's cracked it. The list will have more than 4 elements. You're absolutely spot on. In fact, when we press enter here, you'll see that it thinks the description is just the word this and the rating is the word is. And there's a couple of ways we can deal with this, but the easiest way we can deal with it is unbelievably simple, because we have full control about what's going in the dictionary in what place. All we need to do is swap the way they're asked for in the input. All of these things, the name, the URL, the rating, and the first three are probably going to be one word. The description is probably going to be multiple. So that means that my rating is going to be 2. And then we can use a little bit of string slicing. If I start from position 3 and I put a colon in, and if you remember this from string slicing, I'm basically saying, go to the third element and give me everything else. It also works on arrays, or at least I hope it does. This will hopefully, fingers crossed, give us everything from the third element onwards. If not, we can do a join. Let's see. What do we get? I'm going to do A, B, C, and then do this is my description. There we go. So it has worked, and you can see the description is okay. The description is a list of individual elements, but what we can do there is we can use a command called join to bring them back together, because split breaks things apart, join brings things back together. So if I go to the end of this and just do join, hold on, is that the right way around? Now this is where modeling comes into place. I don't mean modeling like I'm going to jump on a catwalk and go and put a dress on. Modeling in teaching terms is me showing you the way I work so that you can see, exactly what a real programmer does. And one of the things a real programmer has to be very good at is searching for things, because you forget very quickly what the structure of the code is. So I'm just going to go into a web browser and just double check on the structure of this. By the way, this is why things like Ghostwriter, if you can get in the beta for that in Replit, is really, really good, because when I forget the syntax of something, I just go .join and it'll suggest something for me and help me out. I believe, right, so join works the other way around. So I'm going to have to do this as a separate line. So join works like this. I'm going to update it to be this. Join works by saying, what am I going to join them with? I'm going to join them with spaces. Join, and then that bit goes in brackets at the end. So that, you may not have known what join was. I think this is perfectly fine as it stands there, but this is just to make it perfect. So Replit, replit.com, 5 out of 5. This site is amazing. And there we are. Hopefully, Ramona, that's given you an idea about how that might work. I will just warn you, the reason we don't tend to do this very much is that's really, really prone to abuse. And it's really, really fragile, because it is expecting your users to type in an exact string. And if you expect too much from your users and you've got very exacting needs, things can go wrong. I'll give you an example from my life. One of my first jobs was building a website with a database for a client. And it was a very simple database. It was nothing crazy. It was taking information about a person. And the first day we had it up, it completely crashed, took the website down. And when we went through the error logs, it turned out that somebody had tried to upload a GIF to the title field, and we didn't have any checks on it. So instead of getting a title like Mr. or Mrs. or Miss or something like that, it got the binary data of a GIF and brought the entire website down. So people do crazy things. People do strange things with software. So building this sort of system to take the inputs is a little bit fragile, and it probably wouldn't be something you do in production. But of course, if you put enough checks on that, and if you put enough balances on that, you could turn that into something really cool. I hope that works for you, Ramona. I'm going to fork this right now, and I'll pop that in the chat for you. So if you want to go and get a copy of that for yourself, you're more than welcome to. Make that public, and I will pop the link up in a second. There we go. So if you would like a copy of that, Ramona, please do go grab it, and you can play around with that, and do come back and tell us what you've done with it. If you do anything anything exciting with it after that, love to see what it was, because that's the fun, is going on and being a bit more exciting with it. Now I'm just going to turn that all into a big comment, and I'm going to take on the other question, which was from James. And James, I'm going to pull your questions up on the screen a minute so we can have a look at it. So if you are still in the chat, please pop in and say hello. So James has said, on day 41's challenge, I placed the user input in one line with a single input, but I'm wondering if it's possible to use a for loop to update the dictionary with the user's values. I presume you don't mean the for loop that was in the sample code that was in the answers, which is there. So if you could give me a bit more detail on what you're looking for there, James, that would be brilliant. Because the for loop I've got here is just a for loop that iterates through the entire dictionary structure. And I'll zoom in a little bit just to make sure that we can all see what I'm talking about here. So this is the for loop I put in the solution. Well, hopefully it's in the solution. It's the one I wrote anyway. And this for loop basically uses a dot items, which is this extension here, which goes through a dictionary and pulls out both the key and the value. So with both of those things, I can then use two variable names in my for, and I can pull them both out. So I can pull out the name and I could pull out the value if I wanted to. Of course, initially, there's no value because I've set them all to none, which is nothing there. James, if you are there, do you want to give me a bit more detail? That would be fantastic. Otherwise, the only other thing you can do with a loop, really, on question 41 is you could store a bunch of websites if you wanted to. But I think I'm coming at you a bit early with that one, because to be able to store a big list of websites, you need to understand two-dimensional dictionaries. Let me have a look at my big list whenabouts that comes in. So that's lesson 46. Day 46 teaches you about two-dimensional dictionaries, where you can store more than one thing in a dictionary. And it's honestly really, really easy. It's a really, really straightforward thing, but I don't want to give you spoilers if that's not where you are. Oh, thankfully, I've got my comments coming up on my own screen here, because I have stopped receiving. Oh, they've all popped in at the same time. Sorry, James, let's have a look. If we could use the for loop to update the values in the dictionary with the user inputs you have in details. Oh, with this breakdown here, yeah, we probably could actually. Yeah, should we go back and do that? I see what you're saying now. So just to clarify, because I think I misunderstood this one completely. What James is asking, I'll pop the bit up on the screen so we can all have a look at it. I can get my mouse to the right place. James is saying we take this part here, the details part. I'll just hash that out. And instead of using manual attribution of them, we put these things in. Let's have a think about how we could do that, because we could definitely do that. We could definitely do it, but I don't know if it would be very efficient, because we would need to have look, we could do it, but I think we would need to have a way of checking what the values, sorry, what the names are. So we have to put a bunch of if statements in there, because otherwise we're just, or could we do? No, we can do this because we know the order of the elements in the dictionary. That means if we had a counter to keep track of where we were, we could keep an eye on everything here. We just need a special case for description, I think. Let's give it a go. Is it? Come on, we can do this thing. We can do this thing. So we've got the split there. Let's turn these lines into a for loop. So I am going to include a counter, which is I know a counter isn't the best situation, but there we go. I think to do this, though, we would have to swap the order of these around, because otherwise we're going to have a special condition. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my description in my dictionary, and I'm going to pop it there. Oop. That's so that the order that they come in, when they're coming from the for loop, remember, it's going to go through those in the key order. They should appear, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the same order that I'm expecting them in down here. So I'll move this one up now because this makes a bit more sense why I'm doing that. Because now I've got my dictionary in name, URL, rating, and description order, and the split list is in that same order as well. So let's give it a go. Name, value in website.items. That's just to pull all the things up. I probably don't need value, to be honest here. I can probably leave value alone because I'm not taking the value out. Oh, by the way, a lot of people ask me why you don't just do something like value equals to set it to. Remember how a for loop works. A for loop creates a variable called, in this case, name, and takes a copy of the data. So it's great for looking at stuff. It's not very good for changing stuff directly. If I change name, it would just disappear into the ether, unfortunately. So we're going to say website name, again, that's the variable name, not the literal name, is equal to details, then counter. So we then need our next line to do counter plus equals 1, is adding 1 to the counter each time. So that's going to work for these three, 0, 1, and 2. In fact, let's just check that works. I'm a bit concerned that nothing's running. Of course, that could be my internet, so we'll see what's going on. Here we go. So I'm just going to do A, B, C, and then D would be my description. Okay. Dictionary change size during iteration. All right. Okay. That's a bit of a concern. Input's not there. No, Ramona, inputs up here on line 6. So that's what's doing that. Let's have a look. Let's print out what's happening. So line 9 it doesn't like. So it was the loop. So let me just check that's not the issue, because sometimes they can be a bit fussy with things like that. Let's have a go. Oh, here we go. It was that. It was not having value in there. So this works at a very simple level, but the problem we've got, James, is that it doesn't do that long description stuff, the stuff that we were struggling with in the last one. So, oh, thank you, Ramona. Yeah, sorry. It's difficult to have a conversation on these because I'm about 20 seconds ahead. So when I get into talking, the messages come up a bit later. So do please put comments in the chat if you're correcting me or you're pointing out the errors. But just there's about a 10-second delay. So apologies if I'm not getting to your comments straight away. I'm not being rude. Right. So we need to deal with that last situation now, because at the moment, if I do this and I go A, B, C, and then I do this is my description, just going to pull that first word out like it did last time. So we need to put a special case. We need to have an if counter equals, what would this be? 3. Interesting question here. I'm not sure JavaScript has that. I'm not sure, Matt, that JavaScript has that. I think there might be something similar, but the enumerate type thing is something that I hadn't seen until Python. That's not to say it's not there, but it might not be entirely there. So we can just use this, actually. We can just use this entire code pretty much, because we know that item 3, and I know this is a bit of a cheat because we're saying that the last item is that, but unless we want to tell the user what symbols to put around each part, I think this is probably the best we're going to get. And I could use counter in there if I wanted to, but for simplicity's sake, A, B, C, this is my comment. Still having that problem here. If counter is, I didn't put that second part in an else, so I was overwriting it. Here we go. I was doing it, hopefully, but I was then writing over it with the same thing again in a second. But yeah, I'll come back and do a bit more explanations in a second. I'm just doing some rubbish there. And there we are. That's working. So there's a recent code help post by bottom of Discord if you want to check it out. Sorry, but I'm not. Was that about this particular question? Was it? I'll have to go back and have a look. So do let me know. Hopefully, the confusion. Let's see if we can sort that out. Okay. So what's happening here? And I'll the Discord question was it? And James, I'm sorry if this was a bit esoteric. I think the problem is that this scenario that I've constructed here is as close to being realistic as you can when you're dealing with a one-dimensional dictionary, because they are useful, but they are more useful if you can store more than one thing. If I could store multiple websites in this, then it would be more use. And then having loops and loops and things like that in the same place would be more meaningful. So I love the questions. I love what we've done tonight, but this again has that same problem. It's just very fragile. And so this would work, but you have one user that gets the order wrong and your program's going to crash or your data is going to be meaningless. So it's a great exercise and it's a good thing to accomplish, but I would just say think twice about using something like this if you're writing production code, because honestly, if you're writing code for real people to use, sometimes simpler is better. Sometimes just having 4 inputs is better than using a loop if you're worried that your user is going to break something. Now, in a few lessons time, and let me have a look, when is it? Lesson 52, which I don't think is out yet, but it will be out reasonably soon, I think. I think. Yeah, I've just done the graphics for that today, actually. So lesson 52 is about try and accept constructs. They're a way of wrapping lines of code in a special construct that basically says, look, this might crash. If it does crash, don't kill the entire program. Do this instead. So some of the problems that we've introduced by making this a little bit fragile, we can fix with the lesson on day 52. So that's worth keeping an eye out for. By the way, if you are here for the 100 Days of Code stuff, new content is, we aim to get new content out every Friday until we've got all 100 days done. But just to give you an idea about where we are currently working on this Friday's releases and working on some of next week's as well. And in terms of planning, it's all planned out and ready to go all the way up to the very, very last lesson, which, spoilers, you'll be writing a beautiful website that will tell you exactly when you should buy a product of your choice. It'll keep an eye on the prices and it'll alert you when it becomes as cheap as you want it to be. So it's a pretty cool final project that's actually quite useful and doesn't involve you signing up for any random weird web services. You can do it all from within Replit or in pure code. Thank you very much, by the way, to both James and Ramona today for bringing really interesting problems my way. James, I'm going to do the same thing for you. I'm going to fork that and make it a public REPL and send the link in the chat for you. Need to have at least that lesson. And this isn't just for James. The other link wasn't just for Ramona, but they're the people that asked the questions. I'll post the link to the cover page in the chat. And of course, that's just getting the URL and popping it in there. So if you do want to take a copy and you do want to have a little play around with it and especially take it apart and see how it works, feel free. Right, let's move on to some other questions that we've got today. So now this is an interesting one. This is why I brought it up because, again, we do have a lesson on this in 100 Days of Code, but it's not for a while. Let me have a look. When is it? When are we dealing with that? Okay, this comes into everything at lesson 70, but it's actually a really, really easy thing to do. And the question here from Emar is that I'm being a terrible old curmudgeon here and presuming somebody's gender. They aren't I? Emar is asking us, about using secrets. And it's because if you're working with code that involves you using things like API keys, or even, you know, if you were going to write a piece of Python code, or a piece of Java code, or even a piece of C code that sent emails, the only reasonable way to do it nowadays is to connect that to like a Google account or an email server. And for that, in the code, you need to have your username and your password. And I'm sure we all think that is horrendous, because putting your password in code in plain text is not a good thing to do. And in fact, some of the problems levied at GitHub's um, artificial intelligence helper Copilot is that it's been trained on all their data. And unfortunately, you can feed it some prompts and get people's passwords out of it if you know what you're doing, which is a little bit scary. Thankfully, our version Ghostwriter doesn't seem to have those problems. It's a very, very helpful thing if you want to use an AI assistant. If you get in the beta, it's really, really cool. I did about 3 days work on Saturday in an afternoon because of it. It was really, really cool. But that aside, there are ways of storing things like usernames, passwords, API keys, and secrets, and all that sort of stuff within Replit and within a programming interface that you can call, but are hidden from the users. So this is hidden in 2 ways. One, if you're building a program that a user will be running, they can't see or read your secrets. 2, if they fork it, they don't get a copy of those secrets. They would be blank. So there's no way for a user looking at your code or forking your project to get any of your personal information. And it's really, really quite nice. Again, spoilers for the high numbers on 100 days of code. But it's here from within any REPL. And so I've got the, I gave myself away with this earlier on, didn't I? But this is a work in progress version of a new sidebar. But I'll bring up here the secrets option. Now, when you see it, you'll have a little option with a little lock on the left-hand side on the toolbar over here on your screen. The secrets options are really nice. I'm just going to pull it out and stick it over here so it looks as close to what you get as possible. All you need to do for a secret is to give it a key name and a value. Now, I know that all of you watching live know exactly what I'm talking about, because we've been talking about dictionaries today, haven't we? And that's all a secret is. It's a hidden dictionary. So if I had something like a username, and my username was, I don't know, David, I can add that, and that's stored now in my secrets library. What about my password? Or maybe it's Baldy1. That's stored there now. The question is, how do we get that out? Well, first of all, and the nice thing about all these built-in functions in Replit is the docs, the sidebar, they just got little buttons to bring stuff in. So first of all, that brings in OS. And OS is a really important library to know about, which is why we've looked at it. I know we've only really looked at it in 100 days of code for like clearing the screen and making sure there was nothing on there at the moment, but we do go into it in a bit more detail later on. And then to access a specific secret, we can just use this drop domain to pick it, and we can click insert. So I know that was username, so I could bring in my username, bring in my password as well. And I'm really misusing it here. I'm really misusing it because you would never do this in a million years. But if I print an F string of these things, try to print an F string without putting any quotes in, which is a little bit embarrassing to do on a live stream. Username and password there. If I run this, we'll see my username and password coming out, but they are not stored in the code at all. They're stored in my secrets. So there are 2 things that we could do here. If I were to share this with you, and I will pop it in the chat so you can go and take a look at this yourself. If you go and have a look at the cover page for that, you can run it and you can see my username and password, but go and fork it. Go and make a fork of that code. When you try and run it, it will error. And it will error in your fork because you have not set a username and password. So if I didn't print it out, I could use it to log into my email server. I could go from there. It is a really, really fantastic way of keeping information like API keys secret. So Emar is going to get a reply from me in a few minutes' time with a link to this video telling him that I'm presuming gender. This is an embarrassment for somebody living in the 21st century. I apologize. I'm going to make Emar's day, and I'm going to let them know that I have answered their question live in Replit 101 coding helpline. Okay, we're doing quite well tonight. Now, here's an interesting question here from Pistachio JH. Okay, what's the best way to think about when and how to create subroutines? Well, this is a very, very powerful question, I think, because that's a big deal. I've gotten through about 30 days and sometimes still need the hints to figure out the structure of the subroutines. Do any seasoned programmers have recommendations on how to think about building subroutines? Anything in particular you're looking for? Are you always looking for ways to build a subroutine for the work you're doing? I would say this to you, Pistachio. I would say learning what makes a good subroutine you get from practice. You get from trying it again and again and trying to look at the code you're writing and make your life easier. The point of subroutines is, at the end of the day, efficiency. It is about making what you're doing when you're writing your code as quick and simple for you as a programmer as possible. You should never be repeating yourself. First of all, I always think this could be a subroutine if I'm trying to write code and I'm starting to copy and paste. If I'm copying and pasting my own code, chances are it should be a subroutine or a loop or something like that. So take that on board. If you're copying and pasting chunks of code, it's likely it should be a subroutine. It is a common thing for programmers to want to build a subroutine for everything. It's not always necessary. And when we talk about programmers, oftentimes they're in two camps. You have your programming engineers and your programming scientists. And the major difference is that your computer scientists tend to like to think in the abstract a bit more and like to have lots and lots of subroutines and lots of recursion and things like that, things that feel elegant and feel good, using the computer to its fullest. And an engineer is somebody that can get the job done and maintain the system resources and the integrity of the platform it's working on. Engineers and software engineering as a discipline, to me, is like the ultimate distillation of the idea of computer science. Computer science is this beautiful world, this perfect idea. Everything's a subroutine. Everything is generic. Everything should work perfectly. And engineering is about making things work given the limitations of the systems and stuff that you've got. And to me, that's where all the magic happens. It's the making something work on a device that's a little bit underpowered. All the hacks and all the tricks they did to make the first version of iPhone OS work on the first iPhone. There's some amazing engineering techniques that went to that for very underpowered hardware to run such a big and complicated operating system. Software engineering, to me, is where the magic happens. And so you don't need to constantly be thinking about where a subroutine goes. You don't also need to be living up to a standard of everything's a subroutine. You must do the best for your programs. So if you have a program that would benefit from lots of subroutines because you find yourself copying and pasting, or you find yourself reusing code lots and lots and lots, then use them. If you don't need them for this particular program, don't worry about it. As long as it works efficiently enough for your purposes, then that's all you really need. But practice, put them in where you think they're sensible, and just keep your head going. And if you are looking at my solutions and going, I just don't know how we thought about that one, well, the answer, unfortunately, is the same one as the reason why I have very little hair on the top of my bonds. It's age and practice. I've been teaching programming for the best part of 20 years. I have taught subroutines multiple times. hundreds, thousands of times maybe. And so my brain is looking for good examples and looking for ways of showing how that's working from experience. The more you write them, the more you see code, the more you'll internalize what makes a good one. So don't beat yourself up about it at this early stage that you can't just do it like that. It's a practice thing. Practice makes perfect. Just keep doing it. And by the end of 100 days of code, you will be able to put subroutines together in a very confident way. And after a couple of years, it'll be second nature to you about what you do and how you take it apart. If anybody in the chat has any opinions on this that aren't just me talking about it, please do pop your comments in. Love to hear them, especially if you have any hints for Pistachio about how they can make decisions on what is a subroutine, how best to structure it, and things like that. You've probably seen as well from my answers in the 100 days that I often don't write subroutines that return anything. It's a bad habit of mine, unfortunately, because the level to which I would teach secondary school, high school, didn't really require doing a lot more than that in the assessments. So it's a bad habit I've picked up. Returns are very, very useful. Just say hi to Qwerty Qwerty, popped up in the chat. Hello. Always nice to have a shout out. So let's have a look at some questions from the Discord. Discord's a great place to go. I am unfortunately guilty of not spending a lot of time there. I need to spend more. Every time I go there, I'm like, why don't I spend more time in this community? It's brilliant. Our Discord is full of great people that have a broad set of interests, but all love Replit and love programming. So it's a great place to go if you've got coding questions or if you just want to hang around and chat to people. But this question I thought was interesting here because this is a really common problem, believe it or not. When I was teaching students in the classroom, would probably come across this problem once a day. And it's not a problem with anything in particular, but it's a really weird problem that pops up. And our user here, our user Zimbabwe, I believe, is saying, I have no idea what's wrong with this. It's giving me an error, but he doesn't know. So the issue is the indentation of the print, according to the title. It keeps telling the print statement's not properly indented when it seems like it is. And look at it, it is. Those little lines. Didn't have the screen on. That was a lot of good, wasn't it? So the print statement does look like it's properly indented here, assuming that the user is wanting to print out this string here after the if statement has run. And again, because of the structure of this if statement, that print will never actually print if the message author is the user, because it'll return before it gets there. That's by the by. The error message is that print is not indented enough. It looks indented enough to me. Let's zoom in a bit, see if I can get this image looking a bit better on the stream so we can see what's going on. Let's see if I can get that image up on its own. That's better. Here we go. So hopefully you may be able to see here that the line coming down from the if is perfectly in line with the print statement there. So it looks good to me. Now, what the error usually is in this case is that the user has mixed spaces and tabs up in indentation. There's a reason that that's a very important thing for a lot of programmers, that we tend to fall into the tab or the spaces camp. And there's not a lot of people that do both. And the reason for that is that sometimes compilers just get confused. If you've been using tabs all the way through and then you start using spaces, sometimes it'll freak out, and vice versa. The only real way to fix this, unfortunately, would be to click before the print, backspace until the print ends up by return, press enter again, and press backspace until you're indented at the right level. That will automatically put the same types of indents in as the rest of the program. I've often encountered situations with my students, though, where, yeah, this happened, but then the error jumped up to the line above, and it was the same problem. It was a different kind of indent causing the problem. So either pick your tabs or pick your spaces, but ideally, don't do both, because they do get a little bit confused. these poor compilers. Maybe that's what the next generation of programming languages can be. Never mind machine learning. I just want you to not get confused between spaces and tabs, please, compiler. That's all we want from Python version 4. So if you're listening, anybody that builds or designs programming languages, let's fix that first, shall we? But that problem is really, really common. And when I saw this pop on the Discord, I was like, oh, I've seen that hundreds and hundreds of times. Right, we've got a few minutes left. We'll have a quick look at the last question. Now, I wanted to look at this question because this user is saying, how do I redirect a user after I finish login? And they're saying the language is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which, if you've not done it, probably means they're using RepLauth. RepLauth is brilliant. So I pick that as my template and I create one. RepLauth allows you to create a login system with one click. So if I refresh my web view at the moment, it's saying hello world. If I go into my authentication options, I'll just pop this over here, get rid of this for a second. And I click enable login page. There you go. I've now got a login page. It requires you to sign in with your Replit account in order to get access to it. That's going to prevent 90% of spam attacks. Sorted, fixed. So it's very easy to apply authentication. But what the user was asking for in their question was, right, I've done that. I built a page. How do I then move on to a different page? How do I do lots of things? And reading through it, it became obvious to me that the user had picked a HTML CSS REPL. That's great. But this is static hosting. This means that every page has to be hard coded. Every page has to be perfectly coded by you for the exact purpose. There's no customization that happens on the fly to a different user. If you want to do things like when somebody's logged in, put them to a different page, you can, but you have to do it with things like JavaScript, things that run in the browser. And those are things, unfortunately, that can be easily hacked or easily hijacked to change the way your site works. If you are building a site and you have needs to redirect people to different pages, if you need to work things out and display different bits of information on the screen, by far the safest thing you can do is run a web server. And on Replit, that's going to look like probably something like, again, buddy, if you're still in the chat, Node.js, I believe, is a web server, but I would be using something like Flask, which is Python based if you learn Python. So that makes it very, very easy to take what you've learned and expand upon it. Or my personal favorite, the thing that lives in my heart is PHP. And I know it's just me and Mark Zuckerberg that like PHP, but you know, PHP brothers for life. That's all I can say. I do love a bit of PHP, but those are web servers. And the idea being is that when you click run, your REPL is running code that when somebody asks for a page, it can make the page for you. And if they're not allowed to see that page, it can send them to a different one. And that's all controlled by you, by the code on your server. And that's a little bit more manageable and a little bit more secure than running it through JavaScript in the browser, where it's easy to hijack, right click and change what's going on. So if you're building a website and in any way you need your security, I would recommend running a web server. And if you are doing 100 days of code, we start talking about Flask and web servers roughly about day 73, when we're going to start talking about how web apps can use Python to do some amazing things. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We're getting towards the past time now, the end of the hour session. Please do keep bringing your questions in to Replit Ask, which is ask.replit.com, and is where you can go and post questions about 100 days, about any of your coding problems. This is it, of course. And there are some places just to go and ask questions, especially if you're not sure if a problem that you have is, I suppose, is it code or is something not working the way I think it should? It's a great place to go. We've got a bunch of very active users that can help you out there. And of course, we've got Ian, who is our community manager, who can help you as well, who's a teacher and a very, very good one at that. So ask questions and he will usually provide some good answers if the community don't get to them. We've also got our Discord. Our Discord is brilliant. If you've not signed up for it, please do. It's a great community where you can go and ask a bunch of stuff. And my favorite thing is the code help section. It's my favorite thing because whenever I go reading it for this program, I get absolutely sucked into trying to solve people's problems in my head as well. But it's a great place to go and have a conversation. And you'll see there's lots of conversations with lots of replies going on. If you've got some big problem with your code, and I suppose especially if it's a very particular technical challenge, like your Discord bot ain't working right or something like that, it's a great place to go. Discord is well worth a look, well worth your time if you've got questions or if you just want to chat to people. Of course, the other option is coming here to Replit 101 Coding Helpline, where, as some people did today, you can pop your question in the chat and we will prioritize all live questions over everyone else. In fact, today we did about 44 minutes of live questions before we got on to anything else. So they definitely did get priority today. I just noticed my light is making me look a little bit purple today. I think I need to put it back behind me and readjust it. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to Ramona and James for your amazing questions tonight. There's some proper head scratchers to get all that working. Thank you so much. Thank you to Buddy for being there and offering help and support again. And thank you everyone else that tuned in live. And I hope all you hundreds of people that watch Async enjoyed it as well, because I do look at the numbers to make sure this is worth doing. And it is watched en masse Async, which I'm very, very pleased at. I hope you got something out of it. Do send questions in, though, even if you are async. Do send your questions in, because I do intend to get to as many as I can every session. For now, though, have a great evening, and I shall see you all in 2 weeks' time. As long as I can click the end stream video button. Bye, guys.